The human vessel, designated GCS Endurance, cut through the amber-hued sky of Trava like a silver scar. To Princess Brialy, watching from the ancient ramparts of her family's citadel, it was neither an omen of hope nor a portent of doom. It was merely the latest in a long line of galactic disappointments. She understood the unspoken message from the Galactic Council. Sending the humans was a dual sentence. For her people, the Travarians, it was punishment for their stubborn refusal to abandon 10 millennia of tradition for sterile, council-approved technology. For humanity, it was penance for their last, catastrophic attempt at uplifting another species, an event now whispered in bureaucratic corridors as the Yenti incident. Brialy stood as a statue of her culture, a bastion against the tide of forced progress. Her ceremonial armor, forged from obsidian iron and inlaid with veins of luminescent crystal, was a masterpiece of ancient craftsmanship. It was also unbearably heavy, a weight she bore with practiced, regal grace. Her features, sharp and intelligent, were set in a mask of cool neutrality. Her skin, the color of twilight violets, seemed to absorb the planet's orange sun, while her eyes, pools of liquid mercury, tracked the ship's descent with detached calculation. Her court assembled behind her, a spectrum of skepticism in the form of armored guards in simpler, battle-worn plate and advisors draped in robes of deep, wine-red velvet. They were a living tapestry of a civilization that had chosen mastery over mystery, strength over sublight speed. The human ship settled on the designated landing zone with a whisper-quiet hum that was, in itself, disconcerting. Previous delegations had arrived with roaring thrusters and billowing smoke, their technology a loud proclamation of superiority. This silence felt respectful or cunning. The hatch dilated open. No hiss of equalizing pressure, no cloud of condensing vapor. 4 figures emerged. 3 moved with the efficient, coordinated gait of soldiers, their uniforms a practical, muted gray devoid of ostentatious decoration. The 4th, a man with a calm demeanor and eyes that held neither fear nor condescension, wore a dark, tailored outfit that spoke of authority without aggression. And then there was the 5th. Brialy's lips tightened. A Sarian. Enclosed in his gleaming environmental suit, his reptilian features distorted behind the faceplate, he was the Council's ever-watchful eye. Inspector Cusack. She knew his kind, all protocol and paranoia. But her attention snapped back to the humans. Specifically, to what they lacked. Her breath caught, a tiny fracture in her royal composure. No suits. No masks. Not even a filtering apparatus. They walked on Travarian soil, breathing Travarian air, as if they belonged there. The Azari had called their atmosphere caustic. The Zori had deemed it radioactively unstable. These humans simply breathed it. The lead human, the ambassador, broke from his group and approached. He didn't wait for a formal invitation or a ceremonial greeting. He closed the distance between them until he stood before her, well inside the personal space any previous dignitary had meticulously maintained. Princess Brialy, he said, his voice rendered smooth and clear by the translator implant in her ear. I'm Ambassador Kalen Vance. He didn't offer a galactic salute or a flowery speech. He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial register meant only for her. Let's dispense with the theater. We're both here as a consequence. Your people don't want to be improved, and mine have been ordered not to make the same mistake twice. The Council wants a performance. We'll give them one. We play along for the inspector, and then we all go about our business. Agreed. The frankness was a physical blow, disarming her completely. She had steeled herself for patronizing speeches about potential and progress. She had not prepared for blunt, refreshing honesty. Her gaze flicked to Inspector Cusack, who was already gesticulating wildly at the human soldiers, his suit speakers emitting a tinny, frantic buzz about violation of Code 7, subsection 12b. The soldiers listened with polite, blank expressions. A genuine smile, the first in a long time, touched Brialy's lips. Ambassador Vance, she whispered back, leaning into the conspiracy. I believe we have an understanding. Their moment of accord was shattered by the frantic, clicking approach of Inspector Cusack. Absolutely unprecedented, he shrilled, inserting himself between them. No biofilters. No atmospheric scrubbers. This is a clear and blatant disregard for. Brialee tuned out the droning lecture on protocol, her eyes meeting Kaelin's. In that shared glance, an alliance was forged. The aerial tour of her world from within the human vessel, the Endurance, was a study in surreal contradiction for Brialee. Landmarks that were the stuff of epic poems and month-long treks flashed beneath them and were gone in heartbeats. The sheer scale of her planet, once a testament to its timeless grandeur, was rendered suddenly, intimately small by this silent, soaring technology. It should have been exhilarating. It was, instead, suffocating. The source of the suffocation was Inspector Cusack. Seated in the ship's dark conference room, he had commandeered the main holographic display, subjecting both the Travarian and human delegations to an endless stream of statistics and sterile imagery. And as you can see, Cusack droned, his scaled finger stabbing at a hologram of a perfectly symmetrical, gleaming city. The Travarians achieved full societal integration within 3 standard centuries. Note the complete absence of inefficient architectural relics or non-standardized infrastructure. Brialee felt the weight of her armor more than ever. It was no longer a symbol of strength, but a cage. The climate-controlled air was stale, recycled, and devoid of the vibrant, earthy scent of her home. Cusack's voice was a relentless drill, boring into her skull with percentages, productivity metrics, and planetary development indices that held no meaning for her. They were numbers without a soul. A deep, primal need for space, for a moment of silence, overwhelmed her. With the stealth of a hunter, she rose and slipped from the room. Her own guards, their eyes glazed over, didn't notice. The human soldiers, masters of appearing attentive while mentally light years away, gave no sign. She wandered the cool, grey corridors until she found a small, slightly ajar door leading to a storage closet. The silence within was a physical relief. She slid inside, leaning against the closed door with a heavy sigh, finally free from the bureaucratic onslaught. "I don't blame you," a voice said softly. "His presentation on standardized agricultural yield optimization broke me, and I'm trained for this." Brialee started. There, perched on a crate of maintenance supplies, was Ambassador Kaelin. His formal jacket was off, his sleeves rolled up, and he was nibbling on a small, brown bar. He offered a wry, tired smile. "He's thorough," Brialee managed, her heart still calming. "He's an instrument of psychological torture masquerading as a bureaucrat," Kaelin corrected lightly. He broke off a piece of the bar and held it out. "Energy bar? It's oats, nuts, and a bit of chocolate. Should be biocompatible." Hesitantly, she took it. The flavor was strange but pleasant, earthy, sweet, and rich. "Why?" she asked suddenly, the question that had been burning in her since his shocking honesty on the landing field finally spilling out. "Every other species came with gifts, with promises. You came with a deal. Why are you so different?" Kaelin's playful demeanor faded, replaced by a somber sincerity. "We learned our lesson the hard way. With the Yenti, we didn't just give them technology. We taught them the science behind it. The principles, the math, the beautiful, terrifying mechanics of it all." He sighed. "We wanted them to understand, to truly own their progress. The Council called it a catastrophic breach of protocol. They called us reckless. You taught them." Brialee's mind raced, recontextualizing everything she'd been told. "You didn't just hand them a power source they couldn't repair. What's the point of a tool you can't fix, can't replicate, can't truly comprehend?" Kaelin said, echoing her people's deepest suspicion. "That's not uplift. That's creating a permanent client state." The truth of it resonated within her like a struck bell. She looked at him, truly looked at him, not as an alien delegate, but as a kindred spirit rejected by the same sterile system that sought to homogenize her world. "This science," she began, her voice tentative, "this understanding. Would you consider sharing it? With us? Not the technology. The knowledge." Kaelin looked genuinely surprised. "Your council briefing described the Travarians as pathologically resistant to modernization." "We are resistant to dependence," she clarified, her voice gaining strength. "To being given a fish but never a rod. My father, the king, rejects their gifts because they come with invisible chains. If something breaks, we are powerless. If we want more, we must obey. It is control, not charity. A new respect dawned in Kalen's eyes. We were told you were stubborn. We weren't told you were wise. He grinned. Perhaps Earth can help with a bit of real science, then. Emboldened, and feeling a need to show him what his kind had missed, she began to unbuckle the heavy gauntlet of her armor. You spoke of my armor's weight. This science of yours could make it lighter. Easily, he nodded. The gauntlet came away, revealing her bare arm. The purple skin was stretched over corded muscle, sculpted by a lifetime of discipline. It took me a decade to build the strength to wear this without strain, she said, a note of pride in her voice. Kalen leaned forward, his scientific curiosity piqued. He reached out, his fingertips gently pressing against the defined muscle of her forearm. Remarkable, he breathed. Pure physiological adaptation. No gene therapy, no cybernetics. Just dedication. An impulsive, rebellious energy took hold of her. Trusting this human in a way she trusted no off-worlder, she began removing the rest of her armor. Piece by sculpted piece, she set it aside until she stood before him in the form-fitting undersuit worn by all Travarian warriors. The garment left no doubt about her physical power, the broad shoulders, the defined core, the powerful legs. Kalen stood, circling her not with a leer, but with the awe of a scholar examining a masterpiece of natural engineering. Your muscle density, you could probably lift me with one arm. A playful, challenging glint entered her silver eyes. Would you like a demonstration? He blinked, then a boyish grin spread across his face. For science, of course. She stepped forward, her movements fluid and assured. One hand at the small of his back, the other behind his shoulders, and she lifted him effortlessly from the ground, holding him aloft. His face was level with hers, his expression a hilarious mix of shock and delight. See, she said, her voice a low murmur. Perhaps our way has its virtues. Their faces were inches apart. She could feel the warmth of his breath, see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. The air in the small closet crackled with a new, unexpected energy. The moment stretched, taut and silent, until he closed the infinitesimal distance between them. His kiss was not an invasion, but a question. And to her own astonishment, her answer was to kiss him back, her arms tightening around him as she pressed him gently against the wall, the weight of protocol and expectation forgotten. The door hissed open. I had a feeling my presentation on cultural integration metrics would be too advanced for, Cusack's voice cut off abruptly. The inspector stood frozen in the doorway, his scales cycling through shades of horrified green and furious red. His brain struggled to process the scene, the Travarian princess, out of her armor, holding the human ambassador pinned to a wall, both clearly flushed and breathless. Kalen, suspended in her arms, managed to cough. Inspector. Perfect timing. We were just establishing a baseline for human Travarian physiological compatibility. Vital data for any future, collaborative efforts. Brialy stared at him, amazed at the sheer, breathtaking audacity of the lie. For the first time since his arrival, Inspector Cusack was completely, utterly speechless. 2 years. To former Senior Inspector Cusack, it felt like a geological age spent in a special circle of bureaucratic hell. He now stood before the reason for his professional demise, the towering, obsidian doors of the Galactic Council's primary adjudication chamber. They weren't merely doors, they were a judgment, 30 meters of polished, black alloy inscribed with the laws he was accused of failing to enforce. With a groan that seemed to echo his own internal despair, the doors parted. Beyond lay not a room, but an abyss. An engineered void where light went to die, punctuated only by the faint, ominous outlines of raised alcoves spiraling into the darkness. Each one housed a member of the council's leadership, their forms obscured, transforming them into a single, terrifying entity of judgment. In the center of the chamber, a single spotlight ignited, illuminating the presiding figure, President Korvax of the Viri. His elongated, grey skull seemed to absorb the light, his multifaceted eyes gleaming like cold jewels. Former Senior Inspector Cusack, Korvax's voice boomed, resonating in Chuzak's bones. You were assigned a simple task: oversee the human uplift attempt on Trava. Prevent another Yenti incident. The reports we have received suggest you have not merely failed, but that you have presided over a catastrophe that makes the Yenti affair appear orderly. Explain. Something in Chuzak, worn thin by 2 years of futility and ignored missives, finally shattered. The carefully constructed dam of protocol and deference burst. You want an explanation. Chuzak's voice crackled through his suit speaker, louder and sharper than he'd ever dared. You want to know how your brilliant punishment exploded in your faces? I'll tell you. I've been trying to for 2 years, but you were too busy ignoring every single one of my emergency bulletins. A wave of audible gasps rippled through the dark alcoves. No one spoke to the council this way. Ever. It didn't take 2 years. Chuzak raged, his tail lashing behind him. It took hours. I was barely into the 3rd module of my presentation on standardized developmental benchmarks when I noticed the princess and the ambassador were missing. He paced within his circle of light, a caged animal. I found them. In a janitorial storage closet. And she was holding him aloft. Her ceremonial armor was scattered across the floor. They claimed they were conducting strength tests. The human had the audacity to say it was for baseline physiological data. While suspended in her arms. Korvax shifted uncomfortably. A bizarre, but isolated, cultural misunderstanding, surely. Isolated? Chuzak shrieked, his scales flushing a violent crimson. It was a prelude. A harbinger of the protocol apocalypse to come. He began to recount the litany of failures, his voice a torrent of pent-up frustration. I implemented a supervised interaction schedule. They began meeting on the palace rooftops at 3 in the morning. I caught them once. They told me I was interrupting a critical cultural exchange on stellar navigation. I tried using their own staff. The human soldiers taught the Travarian guards a game called poker. There is now an entire underground economy running on laminated cards and dried meat rations within the royal barracks. He whirled to face Korvax's alcove. And the king. Don't get me started on the king. The human ambassador asked for the princess's hand in marriage. One conversation. One. And the king agreed. He was thrilled. Apparently, the human had proven his worth by promising to teach them to build more efficient boomsticks. He gave away his daughter and half the kingdom for a promise of better explosives. The word, marriage, echoed through the chamber, followed by a stunned silence. It gets worse. Chuzak barreled on, a manic energy fueling him. The king now demands heirs. Grandchildren. And the humans, the glorious, reckless humans, see that minor biological incompatibility issue not as a barrier, but as a fascinating scientific puzzle. They have multiple research teams working on genetic bridging. They are going to science their way into a royal bloodline. He finally paused, chest heaving. And it's not just them. There are 10,000 humans on Trava now. 10,000. They came as students and advisors. They are teaching everything. Our soldiers are learning something called guerrilla warfare, while their marines are mastering our broadsword techniques. They've built something called a plasma forge by merging their power cells with our metallurgy. The princess herself publishes a scientific journal distributing every scrap of knowledge freely. Chuzak stopped, his energy spent. His scales faded to a dull, defeated grey. You sent them there as a punishment, but they liked each other. The humans see teaching not as losing power, but as gaining partners. The Travarians don't hate progress, they hate being controlled. You put them together and you didn't get a disaster, President Korvax. He looked up, his voice dropping to a broken whisper. You got the most successful, unauthorized, protocol-violating uplift in galactic history. They've advanced more in 2 years than in the previous 10,000. And they did it all by ignoring every single one of your rules. From a compartment on his suit, Chuzak produced a data crystal. He tossed it onto the floor. It clattered loudly in the overwhelming silence. My final report. 2,000 pages. Every violation. Every incident. Every futile attempt I made to stop them. He turned his back on the council, the ultimate insult, and began walking toward the exit. Where are you going? Kovacs's voice asked, uncharacteristically small and lost. Cusack didn't turn around. I've accepted a position as a culinary critic on Adori Prime. I will be judging soup. It is a quiet, predictable, and protocol-free existence. I suggest you all consider doing something similar. As the massive doors began to close behind him, Kovacs called out one last, desperate time. Cusack. What do you suggest we do? Cusack paused on the threshold, the free world ahead of him. Send them a very nice wedding gift, he said over his shoulder. And pretend this was the plan all along. The door sealed shut with a definitive thunderclap, leaving the most powerful beings in the galaxy in utter, bewildered silence. The silence in the Galactic Council's adjudication chamber was absolute. It was a heavy, profound quiet, the kind that follows a detonation, where the echo of the blast has faded and all that remains is the assessment of the damage. President Kovacs remained motionless in his illuminated alcove, his elongated fingers steepled before his face. The data crystal Cusack had thrown down like a gauntlet glinted on the floor, a tiny, accusing star in the vast darkness. The obscured figures in the surrounding alcoves were equally still, the usual soft hum of their life support systems and whispered communications utterly absent. They were, for the first time in living memory, collectively speechless. The carefully constructed narrative of a controlled, orderly galaxy, gently guiding primitive species toward a standardized future, lay in tatters. It hadn't been shattered by rebellion or war, but by something far more unpredictable and terrifying, genuine affinity and unsupervised curiosity. After what felt like an eternity, Kovacs slowly lowered his hands. The projected image of a sterile, successful Primorian city, still hovering forgotten from Cusack's tirade, flickered and died. The president's voice, when it finally came, had lost all its booming authority. It was thin, bewildered, almost plaintive. The wedding gift, he began, the words sounding absurd even to him. What does one send for an interspecies royal union? Is there a protocol for this? A murmur, tentative and confused, drifted from the darkness. Protocol 889G pertains to diplomatic congratulations on hereditary successions, but it specifies within recognized, spacefaring monarchies. The Travarians are still classified as pre-industrial. A classification that is now demonstrably inaccurate, another voice, sharper and more analytical, pointed out. If the reports of plasma forges and independent scientific journals are to be believed, their technological index is accelerating at an unclassifiable rate. The point, Kovacs interrupted, a sliver of his former impatience returning, is that we cannot classify it. We have no framework for this. Do we sanction them? For what? Rapid, self-directed progress achieved without a single drop of bloodshed? The public relations disaster would be immeasurable. Another voice, older and wearier, emerged from the shadows. The inspector, in his unique way, may have offered the only viable solution. We retroactively approve. We send a gift. We declare the human Travarian cooperative venture a resounding success of the Council's innovative new partnership initiative. A wave of skeptical energy passed through the chamber. A partnership initiative that we just invented this very moment, someone asked. Do you have a better idea? The older voice countered dryly. We reframed the narrative. We did not punish two wayward members of our community by forcing them together. We brilliantly identified their complementary strengths and fostered a groundbreaking new model for cultural and technological exchange. A slow, dawning realization settled over the assembly. It was a spectacular, face-saving lie. It was politics. The humans get their reputation rehabilitated, Kovacs mused, thinking aloud. The Travarians get their sovereignty and their science. And we, he sighed, the sound echoing in the vast space, we get to claim we planned it all along. We look like visionary geniuses instead of incompetent fools. It was the most elegant, and only, solution. The alternative was to admit that their entire Uplift system was fundamentally flawed, that control was not a prerequisite for progress, and that sometimes, the best results came from getting out of the way. That was an admission the bureaucracy was physically incapable of making. Very well, Korvac said, his voice regaining a measure of its command, though it was now directed at damage control. Dispatch the gift. Something grand. Something symbolic. Perhaps a quantum core crystallizer. It is sufficiently advanced to be impressive, yet sufficiently complex that it will require their new science to figure out. Let it be a test of their claimed capabilities. He turned his gaze to the empty space where Cusack had stood, and expunged the former inspector's service record. Classify it. The official story is that he voluntarily resigned to pursue a career in culinary arts. The word tasted foreign and ridiculous. We will announce that the Travarian project has exceeded all expectations under the Council's wise and benevolent guidance. The orders were given. The machinery of galactic propaganda began to spin, slowly and awkwardly, to absorb the shocking anomaly of Trava's success into its official history. The story was being rewritten in real time. Back on Trava, far from the dark chambers of the Council, the rewriting was of a different kind. In a laboratory that blended stone archways with holographic schematics, Princess Brialy pointed to a complex molecular diagram hanging in the air. "The bonding here is unstable," she said, her voice confident. "The human model suggests a carbon lattice, but our own metallurgical texts speak of a crystalline reinforcement that could." Ambassador Kalen, now Consort Kalen, leaned over her shoulder, a smile on his face. "You're combining 15th century Travarian forging techniques with 22nd century human material science." He shook his head in wonder. "You're not just learning it. You're improving on it." Brialy looked up at him, her silver eyes alight with a passion that had long been dormant. "You gave us the why, Kalen. The equations, the principles. We are simply applying the how in ways you never imagined. That is the true gift. Not the tool, but the understanding to build our own." Outside, the roar of a plasma forge mingled with the ring of a blacksmith's hammer. Human engineers and Travarian artisans worked side by side, not in a teacher-student dynamic, but as colleagues, partners. The air crackled not with the silent disapproval of a watching inspector, but with the vibrant energy of unplanned, uncontrolled, and gloriously chaotic creation. The Galactic Council's punishment had failed utterly. It had not created compliance, it had created a catalyst. And on Trava, the future was not being uplifted. It was being built, together, one unexpected idea at a time.